So, a couple of articles. I don't want to get into kind of a summary. I've been listening to a lot of, obviously, like I think a lot of us have, a lot of individuals regarding what's happened over the weekend and what we can expect. The only thing I will say is that for those of us in this room and others that know a little bit about prophecy, I guarantee you we know 10 times more than world leaders or anybody else that doesn't know prophecy. Everybody's trying to figure things out, but we know the end of the story. We don't know precisely how we're going to get there. We don't know all the steps, but we know that what we're seeing has been prophesied. Uh, we know that the one who watches over Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. We know that Israel will never be scattered or cast out again from their land. We also know that Israel is going to go through some pretty severe persecution in the future. And we also know that what we're seeing right now in terms of Israel is prophesied. I mean, it's what Jesus and what the prophets said would happen. We get to the point in the world where the whole world is going to turn against Israel. And you look at what's going on with those protests yesterday at the Golden Gate Bridge and Wall Street and Chicago and other places, all supporting Hamas, and you listen to these people and they're saying things like Israel is committing ethnic cleansing. I mean, that is an absolute lie from the pits of hell. All these protests are based on satanically inspired lies. And so we need to stand up for Israel. We need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and just never lose sight of the fact that, but for God's relationship with Israel, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have the benefit of being grafted into the new covenant, which we read about in Jeremiah 31. And then we see it confirmed in Romans chapter 11 that we as Gentiles are grafted into the promises that God made to Israel. So if it wasn't for Israel, there'd be no opportunity for salvation for us. So a couple of articles. Anybody familiar with Victor Davis Hanson?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. you want you've heard of him, Fletch?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Victor David Hanson. He's on Fox. He's a brilliant guy. I think he's a professor at Stanford and uh, has written a lot of books. He's just a smart guy. But he wrote an article here that I thought was a little bit interesting. It's entitled 11 Ways Biden and His Handlers Are Hell Bent on Destroying America. So basically, he's confirming what we've said in this class many times, that what's happening in the United States is by design. It's intentional. They're bringing us down. It's the slow destruction of everything this country represents, and I believe for the poor purpose of moving us into the new world order, the new global system that is being developed throughout the world. So here's what he says: the left wants these people to come. Wants these people to come. Talking about the immigrants. That's the title, one of the subtitles of the article. Why are those controlling President Joe Biden using him to advance so much of a destructive agenda that it will likely end America as we know it? If someone wished to destroy America, could he do anything more catastrophic than what we currently see and hear each day? What would an existential enemy do that we've not already done to ourselves? So here are 11 familiar steps to civilizational destruction. Number one, wipe out a 2,000-mile border. Allow 10 million foreign nationals to enter unlawfully. Have no audit of any. Nullify all federal immigration laws. Let toxic drugs that kill 100,000 Americans let in toxic drugs that kill 100,000 Americans a year. Give free support to those millions who broke the law. Smear any objectors as racers and xenophobes. Number two, run up a $35 trillion national debt. And we're hearing more and more and more, not just from the from people in the church, but secularists and financial experts saying we're headed for a debt bomb. It's just inevitable. Keep adding $1 trillion to the debt each 100 days. Defame anyone wishing to cut wild spending as cruel and inhumane. In uh, um, Isaiah chapter 5, it says that as we get closer to the end, they will say what's right is wrong and wrong is right, and so on and so forth. And we're seeing that big time. Number three, appease or subsidize enemies like Iran and China. Now, this was written before the attack of last weekend. Demonize allies like Israel. Allow terrorists to attack Americans without adequate response. See Islam as either similar or superior to Christianity. I mean, we're seeing that. Look what's going on in Michigan and other places in terms of the spreading of Islam. Number four, in a multiracial democracy, redefine identity only as one's tribal affiliation. It's ensure each identity group rivals the other for victimhood, and the state spoils it confers. Reboot all political issues by race and sex oppressors and oppressed. Destroy all meritocratic standards of admission, retention, promotion, and commendation. That's what DEI is all about. Diversity, equity, inclusion, replacing getting somewhere based on how well you do. It's not equity, it's not equality where everybody has an equal opportunity. It's equity that they're pushing, which is equal outcomes. Pretty significant difference if you just sit back and think about that. Number five, calibrate violent crimes as understandable, cry of the heart expressions of social justice. Ensure no bail and same day release for arrested repeat violent offenders. Number six, emasculate the military by using non meritocratic standards of race, gender, and sexual orientation to determine promotion and commendation. Deliberately impugn as racist and insurrectionists the largest demographic in the military, who in recent wars died at twice their numbers in the population so that they leave or never join the military. Encourage retired high officers to slander their commander in chief. Cut the defense budget. Stop producing sufficient weapons, but leave billions of dollars worth of arms to terrorists. 80 billion that we left in Afghanistan. Number seven, reinvent the justice system to indict, bankrupt, convict, jail, and eliminate political appointments. Is that what's happening to Donald Trump by any chance? Use ballot removal, impeachment, civil suits, state and federal indictments rather than elections to defeat an opponent. Mob the homes of non compliant Supreme Court justices and attack them personally by name, like Schumer coming out a year or two ago and saying that we're coming after you, whichever justices, Kavanaugh and whatever the other one was, we're coming after you. Uh, you've made a big mistake. Number eight, encourage the fusion of the bureaucratic state with the electronic media to form a powerful force for political audit, surveillance, censorship, and coercion. Marry the FBI to Silicon Valley and hire its contractors to warp the news and hound supposed enemies of the people. Number nine, make war on affordable gasoline and natural gas. Substitute inefficient, unreliable, and expensive wind and solar power, even as energy prices nearly bankrupt the middle class. I've been listening to some of the pundits about what's going on with Iran, and should this escalate, the potential to hit $150 a barrel oil, which could mean as much as $10 a gallon for gas, is not out of the realm of possibility. Marry late, number 10, but preferably not at all. Consider males toxic, especially boys. Have no children, or as few as possible. Otherwise, assure children they are entitled and must be sheltered. Raise them to have grievances against past generations and current norms. So we're seeing the impact of the propagandizing has been taking place against young people for the last 50 years. It's really starting to take roots, almost to the point where, or to the point where I think I read recently something like 60% of the millennial generation does not even believe in God, or at least has some serious doubts about it. Number 11, turn world-class universities into indoctrination centers. Are we seeing that big time or what? Suspend the Bill of Rights on campuses. Train youth to graduate despising their own culture and civilization. Recruit foreign students from hostile nations to subsidize campus commissar bloat. Replace the curriculum with therapeutic propaganda. Ban the SAT, ACT, and do not evaluate comparative high school GPAs. Ensure merit does not select the student body. Charge tuition higher than the rate of inflation. Bill the government when students default on their loans. Why could those controlling the president be doing all? Why would those controlling president be doing all of the above? One, they're delusional and think they're socialists. This is interesting. I kind of put brackets around these two words: socialist and global agendas. That's what it's all about. They're socialists, they're Marxists, and their agenda is to move us toward this new world order. Are working and will save us. Number two, they are raging nihilists, which means that a nihilist is one who rejects religious and moral principles, who do not like the U.S. and deliberately want it destroyed as a service to the world. A ruined U.S. is preferable to a strong America. They are revolutionaries who are intentionally erasing the old United States as a prerequisite for creating an entirely new America that will arise from the ashes with no trace or even memory of the past. Uh, I think I've heard that we're going to fundamentally transform America. Wasn't that a campaign promise a few administrations ago? And that this one started out, although they had to get away from it, from a slogan of rebuild or build back better. I mean, it's really what they're trying to do, to tear it down so they can build it back, representing something that's altogether different, which is socialism. Socialism, getting to the point where we'll own nothing, but yet we'll be very happy, which is, all part of the World Economic Forum. They have no agenda. They are aimless fools and utter incompetence. These bunglers just wing it day to day in response to what their radical media, academic, and political masters dictate is necessary for them to retain power. Number five, a bit of 1 through 3, but probably not 4. Uh, number 4 being they have no agenda. There is cause and hope among this nihilist remaking of America. People are fed up and will demand an accounting in the fall. We'll see how that works out. But at any rate, I thought that was very telling. And can anybody deny that any of those 11 things or 10 things are actually occurring? Yeah. And it's being done for a purpose, to destroy us. Okay, here's another one. We talk a lot about, we'll talk later about comments and questions. Uh, the SWIFT, which is, everybody's heard of the SWIFT bank. It's a system that's kind of like it's a system where all the banks kind of intermingle. And the big story with SWIFT was that Russia was kicked out of it when they entered into um, uh, Ukraine a few years ago. But here's an article entitled "SWIFT Planning: Launch of Central Bank Digital Platform in 12 to 24 months." This stuff is real, folks. It's really in the process of happening. Central bank digital currency, digital identification, and all those types of things. They're out to take away our rights, to control to control the population, which is exactly what we read about in Revelation chapter 6. We're so quickly moving toward the time of the four horsemen of the apocalypse: the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the pale horse. Those are, as so many have said, we can hear their hoofbeats off in the horizon. Global Bank Messaging Network SWIFT is planning a new platform in the next 1 to 2 years, and that's consistent with other reports we've been studying and are taking a look at, to connect the wave of central bank digital currencies now in development to the existing finance system, it told Reuters. In other words, you have 100 and some odd nations currently in the process of developing their central banks, developing their own central bank system. And at the end of the day, they can't all be independent. And so there's going to have to, at some point, be an attempt or a means of bringing them all together under one system, which is Revelation 13 coming true right before our eyes. We're seeing the stage being set for this one world economic system. And that's why it's happening. That's why all these things are happening. God's putting the pieces of the puzzle together. He's like the chess master. He's moving this piece. He's moving that piece. He's doing this. He's doing that. And exactly as we see prophesied 2,600, 3,000, 2,000 years ago throughout Scripture. The move, which would be one of the most significant yet for the nascent CB, central bank digital system ecosystem, given SWIFT key role in global banking. It's not the only one. We have the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and the Bureau of International Settlements and all these different organizations that all do different things, but they're all tied into the economic system, including the SWIFT. Around 90% of the world's central banks are now exploring digital versions of their own currencies. Swiss head of innovation Nick Kerrigan said at its latest trial, which took 6 months and involved a 38-member group of central banks, commercial banks, and settlement platforms, has been one of the largest global collaboration on CBDCs and tokenized assets. In other words, everything that's considered to be an asset, money, or other things will be tokenized and it'll be digitized, and all of your transactions, monetary transactions, will be via the central bank or this one world system, probably using our cell phones. Uh, and so you think about how many people in the world today actually have cell phones that are going to be a key component or I think, a key part of what's going to happen in the future. Um, it focused on ensuring different countries' CBDCs can all be used together. That's interesting. All be used together, even if built on different underlying technologies. So you can believe they're working on this one world system. It's coming. Or protocols, thereby reducing payment system fragmentation risks rather. So this stuff has to happen. It has to take place. And it's just amazing, along with everything else, how it's all coming into fruition. We're looking at a roadmap to productize or launch as a product in the next 12 to 24 months. It's moving out of the experimental stage towards something that's becoming a reality. So it's no longer just a bunch of gobbledygook. Just one more paragraph. There's more to this article. If you wanted to look it up, it's entitled Swift Planning Launch of New Central Bank Digital Currency. So I think just Google that, you'll find it. The latest trial involved central banks from Germany, France, Australia, Singapore, Czech Republic, and Thailand, as well as a number that requested to remain anonymous. A raft of heavyweight commercial banks, including HSBC, Citibank, Deutsche Bank, Societe Generale, Standard Chartered and the CLS FX settlement platform all took part too, as did at least two banks from China. The idea is that once the interlink solution is scaled up, banks would have one main global connection point available. One main point. Revelation 13, right there. Another one, then we'll get to some, I think, pretty interesting things, and also see how potentially what we're seeing in the Middle East today could possibly tie into what we've been studying, which is Ezekiel 38 and 39. Okay, here's a an article. I'm just going to touch on a few points, and it's entitled "Long Predicted Storm Clouds in the Economy May Be Here as Inflation Rises Again." As we approach what is likely to be the most chaotic presidential election in the U.S. history, troubling signs are starting to erupt for the U.S. economy. In fact, CNN is actually admitting that that quote, the long predicted storm clouds in the economy may actually be forming. I can't remember the last time I saw a CNN article with a headline like that. Inflation is getting worse at the same time that many key sectors of our economy are slowing down. If you thought the last couple of years were rough for the economy, just wait till you see what's coming next. Tremendous turmoil is on the horizon, and the American people are becoming increasingly emotional about our rapidly growing economic problems. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I talk to that say, you can't go out to dinner anymore for less than 50, $75 just for two. The grocery prices, fuel prices, uh, rent, housing. I mean, it's just crazy. On Wednesday, we learned that prices jumped even more than expected during the month of March. The CPI, Consumer Price Index, a key inflation gauge, rose 3.5% in March from a year ago. The U.S. Labor Department reported Wednesday. You can almost bet when they revise this number next month, it'll probably be 4%. That's up from 3.2% in February. But if prices were only rising at 3.5%, that would be outstanding news. In fact, if prices were only rising at 3.5% annual rate, I would not be concerned about inflation at all. Of course, by now, everyone realizes the way inflation is calculated has been changed repeatedly over the years, and so the numbers that the government gives us are essentially meaningless at this point. It's a pretty sad commentary. That's it's almost like you get to the point where you know they're lying because their lips are moving. It's hard to get any truth other than, I mean, certainly there are some really good politicians out there. We need to look at specific categories. The cost of energy is up 36.9% from where it was in January 2021. Of course, energy prices are going to go a lot higher than they are right now. I think oil, if I'm not mistaken, is up to what, $85 a barrel or so, something like that. Of course, energy prices are going to go a lot higher. Just wait until Iran and Israel start lobbing missiles at one another. This article, of course, was written before the weekend. Housing has become insanely expensive as well. In fact, the average monthly mortgage payment on a newly purchased home has approximately doubled since Joe Biden entered the White House. So how in the world can they possibly tell us with a straight face that inflation is in the low single digits if that's the case? Home insurance rates are going into the stratosphere as well. One 71-year-old retiree in South Dakota says that his home insurance payment went up by 110% in just 1 year. It went from $1,665 to $3,490. This guy's on a fixed retirement income, and while his wife, Valeria, 68, is still working to help cover the insurance bills and a whole lot of other costs, let's be honest with ourselves. The truth is that we are in the midst of the worst inflation crisis that any of us have ever seen. Don't let them gaslight you. The price of food's also going nuts. At one location in California, a 40-piece order of chicken McNuggets and two orders of large fries will now set you back more than $25. And they won't even throw in a Sprite. Regrettably, one TikTok user racked up $5 million views when he posted a rant in which he boldly proclaimed, I cannot afford to live. I make over three times the federal minimum wage and I cannot afford to live, he shouts into the camera. It's embarrassing to come out and say that it is a struggle to survive right now, but I know so many people are struggling. Later, he concludes the American dream is dead. Many of us can identify with that. We see it every day, and we're all experiencing this. It's all countrywide. Unfortunately, there are signs that things are going to get even worse. For example, small business optimism in the United States has dropped to the lowest level in 11 years. But I was deeply sad to learn that the 99 cents only store, which is not around here, but is moving toward liquidating all of their stores. 99 cents only shops will begin shuttering their hundreds of locations on Friday as the company moves toward total liquidation. Prior to the announcement, 99 cents only was operating 371 stores in the United States. And of course, we've recently learned that Dollar Tree and Family Dollar will be closing about 1,000 stores. All over America, stores that were once thriving will soon be boarded up. This is what the future of our economy looks like, and many Americans are preparing for rougher times by purchasing large quantities of gold. So, the increase in gold prices that we're seeing, and since March, virtually every day there's been a new high for gold. That's not necessarily a good sign. It means that there are people behind the scenes that know that that the world, the Middle East is in turmoil. It's almost as though these gold prices could have predicted that the war was coming. It also represents a spike in inflation. It just demonstrates we don't want $5,000 an ounce gold. That's not good for the economy. A tipping point has arrived, and the outlook for the months ahead is very bleak. The U.S. economy is going off the rails, and the worse things get, the more frustrated the American people are going to become. So, not probably anything we don't already know, but I thought interesting nonetheless. Okay, let's move into the to the Middle East. Uh, I'm gonna I just took some notes earlier today, uh, based on a couple of is that up there?
Yep.
Okay. Based on a couple of different people I listened to, and I just put together several bullet points to kind of summarize what's happened and what we can look forward to or think we can look forward to. And I think, quite frankly, we all know that Iran or that Israel is going to retaliate. They have to. And what the Western world doesn't realize, particularly our administration and the European Union and others, is that the Middle East is a different ballgame. The only thing that matters in the Middle East is strength. Appeasement is a sign of weakness and will lead to other problems. So Israel really doesn't have a choice but to retaliate. And we don't know what it's going to be. Everything I'm hearing, and probably everybody else has heard, is going to be something pretty significant. I've even heard the potential for an EMP attack over Iran. Now, that seems a little far-fetched, but that's one of the things that they were talking about Sunday night. I think Amir may have mentioned that in one of his updates. An EMP attack would be where a nuclear device is detonated over Iran and would send down uh, charges or radiation that would basically fry the whole country, their electrical system, their computers, and everything. That's a possibility. Other possibilities could be that Israel attacks their oil fields. I kind of hope they don't do that, because that's going to have, I think, even a bigger impact on us. They could go after the wherever it was these rockets were launched from. They could try to take out some of their leaders. They're not adverse to taking out leaders, which they've done even over the last couple of days. They've taken out some key Hezbollah leaders with very targeted attacks. They could go after the nuclear facilities, of which I think there are 15 or so, some of which are well down into the ground and pretty well protected. But there's a lot of possibilities, and the big question is going to be what, if anything, Iran will do to retaliate. So this has the potential to escalate to levels we've not seen before, and I think it's largely going to, I think, depend on what Israel's response is. But again, they really don't have much choice. Um, but to do that, in the meantime, we've got our wonderful administration saying Biden warns Netanyahu, the U.S. will not support Israel's counterattack. I can understand that, and I believe they said they will not support them offensively, but they will defensively, which is good. On Iran amid fears of an all-out war. President tells Prime Minister in late night call, you got to win. Take the win after IDF shot down nearly all incoming drones and missiles. Um, so that's the message. Just be happy. Now, interesting. I don't know if anybody has Amir up. I left my phone in my car, but um, he had you wrote a summary today from a fellow that I think he's a statistician or some kind of scientist who wrote about, and I'm going to try to paraphrase it, wrote about um, the odds of Israel, along with the United States and Jordan and Saudi Arabia, France, Great Britain, taking out, what, 98% of all the missiles and drones, that statistically it's virtually impossible for that to have occurred, to be that successful. And to me, that comes back, and I'm not sure if this guy's a believer or not that wrote that, but that to me gets back to Psalm 181 that we've talked about so many times, where it states that, like we said already, that he who watches over Israel neither slumbers or sleeps. God's got Israel. None of this came as a surprise to him. Think about Psalm 2 as well, where it says that these nations will be conspiring against him. That's what's happening. They don't realize it. But Satan is motivating these nations and peoples and leaders and globalists to turn against Israel, to try to wipe them off the face of the map, and they're his people. And there's a price to be paid. And I'm afraid that we are headed in this country to judgment. Now, the one thing that could hold that back, severe, serious judgment, potentially, and we don't know the final outcome or what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or a month from now, but the church being here. We as the church are restraining the full force of judgment. But once the rapture takes place, which let's face it, could happen tomorrow, uh, you can believe that the United States will cease to exist, at least in its current superpower status, which we're losing in a very, very real way. So let me just go through, in no particular order, these various bullets that I wrote down. What happened Sunday evening was a new phase. It's a new level that has been broadened to potential chaos. Not necessarily going to be a good thing. Although, as we're going to see when we get to Ezekiel, Israel has to be at a time or a place of peace and safety at some point in time. We've already seen the risk of Russia, Ukraine broadening or threaten to be broadened out to other nations. They talk about going after various NATO nations and the Baltics and Poland and Sweden. So that possibility looms large. It's certainly not a huge surprise as Israel's the little Satan, and we need to remember that. while the U.S. is the big Satan. Prior to 1979, and we've talked about this before, Iran was a key ally of the United States. That shifted with the overthrow of the Shah in 1979 in the implementation of a radical Islamic regime under Ayatollah Khomeini, who was brought back from exile after the Shah was overthrown. And that regime, this Islamic regime, uh, has lasted ever since. It was Khomeini, he passed away, now it's Khamenei. Sounds like the same person, but two different people. The true power of Iran in Iran lies with the clerics. You know, as we hear all the time, the Iranian people are wonderful people. They don't want this. But if they speak against it or if they protest or whatever, chances are they'll be executed or tortured. So this regime is so autocratic and so dastardly in what they potentially do. Iran's view, well, it has survived. Iran's view of Israel is religious and it's apocalyptic. It holds that Israel has no right to exist. So understand that the Muslim clerics, the radical Muslims, think and believe fully that Israel has no right to exist. And I think that evil seed has permeated the whole world. You know, when you see all these protests and people saying from Palestine to the sea or from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That simply means that Israel's got to get out. They've got to be eliminated. They've got to be exterminated. And if you think about it from a biblical perspective, it makes perfect sense that Satan would do everything in his power to eliminate the Jewish people. Now, when Shirley and I went to Washington for a little getaway last weekend, and we went to the Holocaust Museum. I don't know if anybody's done that. We actually visited as well in Israel, but it's I think almost a must visit for Christians because it really puts in perspective how evil the Holocaust was. And just look around today and see how Israel is, the Jewish people are again being uh, paraded toward another Holocaust. That's exactly what the Muslims would like to see happen. So it's apocalyptic. It holds that Israel does not have a right to exist. Their goal is to bring in the Mahdi. Now, we've talked about, I think, that before, but Shia Islam and then Sunni Islam thinks about it a little differently. But the Mahdi is kind of like their Christ, if you will. And he was a young descendant of Muhammad, or he was cleric that disappeared in, I think, the seventh century or so. And they believe that he's been held up hiding somewhere in a well. And his job is going to be during the end times to come on the scene and to create a worldwide caliphate with Sharia law, the whole bit, worldwide. And that's one of the reasons why you're seeing Muslims migrating throughout the world is to set the stage for this. I mean, look in the United States. I just saw a statistic the other day that 49% of Muslims in this country think that Hamas did the right thing on October 3rd. In this country. To me, those people ought to just be deported. But they're here, they're in the universities, they're coming over and they've got all kinds of money behind them. You can't export. It's crazy. And it's about the same in Great Britain, where there's been a tremendous influx of Muslims over the last several decades. So they want to bring about the Mahdi and global Islamic theocracy. In order to do that, Israel must be defeated. They've got to be destroyed. They don't have a right to exist. In fact, and I've said this many times in the past, but there is a saying in the Hadith. The Hadith is like a collection of sayings by Muhammad that were made, and it's not the Quran, but it's as sacred as the Quran because it's all his purported sayings and statements and deeds and so forth. It's a summary of his life. And one of the things that's written in there is the end cannot come until the trees and rocks cry out, there's a Jew behind us, come and kill him. So it's built into their belief system, and it's all tied to this Mahdi thing. And so when we see Iran doing what they're doing, it's a Shiite nation. Uh, it was stated several years ago that they could easily lose a couple of, many millions of people, of their own citizens, and they don't really care because their goal is to create chaos, destroy Israel, destroy then the big Satan, and make way for the Mahdi to come on the scene. They actually believe this is going to happen. Israel has to be defeated. Iran and its Shiite allies need to take the lead to usher in this apocalyptic future. Without understanding the religious aspect, it's difficult to understand the nature of what Iran is doing. Not just that they're bad players, but it's a deeply embedded uh, belief system within at least the radicals. Until this changes, which it won't, we have no reason to believe that Iran will change in any substantive way. It's interesting that when it comes to this last event that took place, that uh, that the United States, Great Britain, France, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan also contributed. Now, if we look and see something interesting in Jeremiah chapter 49, um, for Saudi Arabia and for Saudi Arabia and um, Jordan to participate this is mind blowing. For one thing, I think it's testimony to the Abraham Accords that what happened during the prior administration when those accords were set up, and the Emirates and Oman and Saudi Arabia, not a participant yet, but they see tremendous financial benefits to partnering with Israel in becoming and joining in these Abraham Accords. But what we see in Jeremiah chapter 49 is, I think, kind of interesting, and we can kind of drill down a little bit and I think make some sense of it. But the days are coming, which is a reference to the latter days, declares the Lord, when I, it's this preposition I, this personal pronoun I is just always uh, mentioned in anything that has to do with any type of judgment. I will sound the battle cry against Rabbah, which is essentially northern Jordan, and the Ammonites. It will become a mound of ruins, and its surrounding villages will be set on fire. So, what we see here essentially is a prophecy that's not yet been fulfilled about Jordan ultimately experiencing some judgment, and its surrounding villages will be set on fire. Then Israel will drive out those who drove her out. So the question is, and I got this is my own, I come up on this, none of the stuff I come up with on my own. I'm not capable of that. So I got this from Tom Hughes today in his update. But essentially, and it kind of makes sense, is that it's possible that as a result of Jordan participating in this taking down of the drones and the missiles, that Iran could go after them and could render them to what is prophesied here, at least part of Jordan, to become a mound of ruins. That's a very distinct possibility because then it goes on to say, then Israel will drive out those who drove her out. So Israel is they're very solid in terms of principles and morals and so forth, and obviously are very strong. So here's a nation that supported them. You can believe and bet that if Iran were to do something like that, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but if something like that were to happen, Israel would certainly come and support them. So something to think about in terms of that. So I also have a video from Brigitte Gillette, which I think I'll show at a different time because we're running a little short on time here. But Trump initiated the Abraham Accords, which helps to bring these powers along. It's ironic, and we all see this in the news, that the Biden administration's given billions of dollars to Iran that have gone toward their military and proxy partners. This money that was given to them, the 6 billion, the 10 billion, allowing them to drill oil. During the prior administration, they were limited to 400,000 barrels a day. Now they're up to 4 billion barrels a day because the sanctions have been lifted. It's this weak, willy-nilly approach to dealing with what is the world's number one sponsor of terror. That it gave billions to Iran that have gone toward their military and proxy partners. Very likely this attack was Iran. So this is speculation. We don't know for sure. But was this attack Iran simply testing the perimeters to see how far they go? During the attack, if you were watching it on TV, uh, you heard them talk about how the drones and the missiles they all had lights. So it was almost like they were sitting targets. And I know for a fact that when Israel attacked the embassy or the outbuilding, whatever, to the Iranian embassy in Damascus, that's what caused this to take place. And the reason, one of the people that, the Iranian leaders, generals that Israel took out, was one of the organizers of the October 7th attack. So they had every right to do that. Now, Israel, when they attack, are always very targeted, and they're very specific. So this was absolutely, they had no choice, in their own minds, they had no choice but to retaliate. So there's a lot of possibilities. I mean, the drones are slow moving, they're pretty easy to take out. But by the same token, the ballistic missiles that they sent, a ballistic missile is one that goes up into the atmosphere and then will come down at tremendous speeds. And with the technology Israel has, they were able to take a lot of those out. What at a cost of over $1 billion? It cost Israel in one night over $1 billion to do what they did. And so there's a lot of possibilities here as far as what happened. Um, so are they trying to learn a lesson from a very dangerous situation while also learning along the way? So it's a very dangerous thing that Iran has done. Um, the markets have not, it's interesting, and I'm not going to get too far off of this, but the markets have not overly responded, which I thought yesterday would be a real down day. It was a bad day, but it wasn't a horrific day in the markets. So, uh, not that that means a whole lot. In the meantime, and this is what one of the fellows that I was listening to said, that it's almost as though the world is currently in the same place it was in 1914 at the beginning of World War One, where the world was just sleepwalking blindly toward World War One and not even knowing that it was coming. Reminded me when I heard that of the prophecy in Matthew in the Olivet Discourse, where Jesus said that at the time of his coming, it will be as in the days of Noah. Remember, that's in Matthew 24. So what that means is tremendous evil will abound, but and it goes on in Luke, I think 17 somewhere where it says that it will be as in the days of Lot, where people will be marrying and giving in marriage and not even just a laissez-faire, hey, everything's fine attitude. So I liken if this is similar to 1914, where people just, hey, everything's fine, we're just eat, drink, and be merry, we're going along. Certainly seems to be tied into this day of Noah and day of Lot prophecy. That's what we're seeing today. I mean, just look around. I mean, people, it's just, they're just got the blinders on. But again, that's one of the things about knowing Bible prophecy as well. I am convinced we know more than anybody because we know the end of the story and we know basically how we're going to get there. But it's also kind of a burden, if you think about it. And the burden should lead us to let as many people know about Jesus. And so that's our burden. So Israel's going to have to respond. There are a variety of scenarios that we'll likely see more about in the coming days. From everything I've read, from what Amir said, they're going to do it. They have to do it sooner than later for it to be as effective as it needs to be. So, we'll just have to wait and see. The U.S. has signaled that it won't participate. We read that headline. The difference here when it comes to Iran, if you listen to Amir, he says this is like a golden opportunity. They've wanted an opportunity to go and retaliate against Iran because they're very good and have up till this point uh, in having their proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah and terrorists and others around the world do their dirty work for them. So this is an opportunity for Israel because those rockets came from Israel's own land or Iran's own land. It's never happened before. The first ever. So it gives opportunity for them to go into Iran. But I think possibly the possibility of it escalating to something much bigger certainly looms large as well. Israel is certainly up to their eyeballs with Gaza, Hezbollah, and now Iran. What I will say is this, is that God throughout history, throughout the Bible, you'll read, often will allow Israel to get right to the brink. They're backed right up against the wall. And, you think about it, they've got to finish Hamas. They got to go into Rafah to take out those terrorists. They've got Hezbollah, who they're kind of battling against. You got the rockets and other things coming from Syria. They're up to their eyeballs in now Iran. And it's just amazing to me when I read about how good their IDF is, how good their intelligence is, how strong they are. God's with them, but they are really running against this. Um, what it's going to do is Israel's limits are surely being tested. They need more weapons. That's just, we're just going to see a continuation, I believe, in the current administration to try to strong arm Israel not to do the things that they need to do under the threat of not supplying weapons. And right now, after what's happened, just like after October 7th, things seem to be okay, but uh, we have an administration that would not hesitate. And I was listening to, and will hopefully outline a teaching that Brandon Holthouse did a while back on what's really going on behind the scenes. That this administration is intentionally doing, trying to overthrow Netanyahu. They can't stand Netanyahu, doing everything they can to replace him, and some real shenanigans going on. Which, I've said this before, I'll say it again, that I think Netanyahu is a modern Winston Churchill. He's a phenomenal leader. Well, you have all these Marxists and leftists doing whatever they can to throw him out, and there's going to be a price to pay, and it's going to be a divine intervention. Um, I'm not going to go any more of this. Is kind of a rough overview. Obviously, the next thing that's on the horizon is what will Israel do? Will they and how severe will it be, and what will it potentially lead to? So almost at that final point that I want to, and I think probably next week we'll get back into Ezekiel 38 because let's just spend a few minutes taking a look at that and catching ourselves up a little bit. Different views in terms of whether this certainly what's happened is not the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's not. But I think the stage is being set for it to occur. And just by way of review, This is our Ezekiel 38, 39 map. And last week we spent a little time identifying who these various players are. These are the nations identified at the beginning of Ezekiel 38 that will, during the last days, move against Israel. And as we talk about that actual move, we read in things like um, verse 9, 38, 9, you and all your troops and the many nations with you will go up, advancing like a storm. You'll be like a cloud covering the land. So most scholars say, and when it says in verse 90, you and your troops, this is Ezekiel, God through Ezekiel, basically talking to Gog, the leader of this confederation. Could be Putin. If not Putin, it could well be his successor. I think there's a fair chance it's Putin if he survives any length of time, but we don't know that for sure. But clearly, Gog is the leader of this confederation or confederacy of nations, including Russia, Iran, Turkey, Libya, and probably the Sudan, and maybe even Yemen, all moving against Israel them like a cloud would seem to indicate it's some kind of a ground movement. But then it does say like a cloud covering the land. So that could possibly bring in the possibility of drone attacks and that type of thing. But at any rate, we don't know specifically how it's going to happen. What we know is it's going to happen. And the stage is currently being set for it to happen. Let me just give you a couple of quick headlines just to kind of put this in perspective. Um, Here's one, and I'll just basically stick with the headlines when we get more involved in the details next time. But here's one: Israel and Russia, the end of a friendship. You know, up until just a few years ago, Russia and Israel had pretty close relationships. Putin has an affinity, or at least did, for Israel. And Russia having a strong presence in Syria would give Israel permission to go in and take out uh, the primarily the Iranian and Iranian proxy military things through bomb them, and so forth. So they were given permission, but that's changed. And here's just a couple of excerpts from this. This is just, and what this tells us is not that long ago that Russia and Israel had fairly good relations, but that has changed in just the last couple of years. Why has it changed? I believe because it's demonstrating the coming together and the stage setting for the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39. Israel is an important partner for Russia in the Middle East, but amid the war in Gaza and Moscow's rapprochement with Hamas, ties between the two countries are at their lowest in recent history. These tensions mark a break in Moscow's long-standing efforts to present itself as a neutral mediator in the Middle East. Russia is increasingly aligning itself with Iran and its allies, and accordingly risks only being able to influence the region from the margins. So I won't read any more of that, but this relationship that was so strong between Israel and Russia is beginning to come apart. And one of the reasons is that there's a very strong relationship growing between Russia and Iran. Russia has been the beneficiary of hundreds of drones that they've used in the Ukrainian war that have been supplied by Iran. Iran is benefiting from anti defense systems that Russia supplied. So they've developed a very strong relationship that probably is gotten to the point where it's going to be too busy to break. So here's another one. Russian weapons help Iran harden defenses against Israeli airstrike. Last March, a Russian arms maker invited a delegation of Iranians to a VIP shopping tour of its weapons factories. The 17 visitors from Iran were treated to lunches and cultural shows, and on the final day, toured a plant that makes products long coveted by Tehran, advanced Russian air defense systems for shooting down enemy planes. The factory, MPP Start, in the city of Yekaterinburg, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is under U.S. sanctions for supporting Russia's war against Ukraine. Among its wares are what it sells and what it's providing to Iran are mobile launchers and other components for anti-aircraft batteries, including Russia's S-400, which military analysts assess to be capable of detecting and destroying stealth fighters and so forth. So this relationship really developing between Russia and Turkey. And then here's another one. Erdogan says Turkey firmly backs Hamas leaders. So we have, and then Turkey is in collaboration as well with Iran and Russia. So it's coming together, and we're seeing the stage set for that. So with that, I've got kicked once, and I've had this thing shoved in my face. And for those that are on out there, that's what this is. Let me just make sure everybody fully understands what I'm up against. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop as promised. Comments, questions, thoughts?
With look up Abrahamic covenants, and all I get is the Bible and Abraham's covenant with God. So I looked up Abrahamic Accords, and it's United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco. Then we had Jordan helping in this raid. Saudi Arabia, there's no love lost between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Right.
So an alternative scenario is that Iran could be shooting itself in the foot
Yes.
with this thing.
Right. Yeah. They would have given the opportunity to go after Saudi Arabia in a heartbeat. They've tried a couple of years ago when they took out a few of their oil wells. See, Iran is a Shia nation, Saudi Arabia is a Sunni nation, and the two just don't really care for each other. Plus, Iran did not like the idea that Saudi Arabia, prior to October 7th, was in talks with the United States and Israel to enter into the Abraham Accords. The problem with that is that Saudi Arabia made it clear that they weren't going to do it unless Israel agreed to a Palestinian state, which would never happen. But, who knows? Who knows? Yeah.
Saudi Arabia came out with a statement today saying that if Iran gets the bomb, that they think they'll be the first ones to receive it.
Yeah.
They're gonna hit Saudi Arabia before they'll hit Israel.
Right. Yeah. The big unknown here is where is Iran in terms of developing a nuclear bomb? It would seem to me that they're probably not quite there, but for the last 15 years at least, I think, we've been hearing that they're within a month or a year or 2 years of being there.
Mir had made a comment earlier this week that they believe that they've got enough nuclear material for 10 bombs. They just haven't assembled yet.
Right.
Is what they're saying.
And have the delivery system as well. Yeah.
But if they can't get 300 cruise missiles and drones and other things like that through the Israeli defense, how are they going to get 10 nuclear bombs through there?
That's a whole different ballgame. I don't know if if a Patriot missile or whatever their defense is, if they hit a nuclear bomb, what that would do.
I mean, one of the things that I always within my mind, and what happened this weekend kind of confirms it. They'll just move the nuclear bomb closer to Israel, i.e. Damascus. And I'm just wondering if that's what makes Damascus uninhabitable. Israel finds out something. That's speculation. It's just one of those things. That would bring some puzzle pieces together.
Yeah.
Would be real interesting.
If they're going to have a hard time moving those nuclear bombs around without Israel knowing about it.
Oh yeah.
But the thing of it is, everybody knows that it's a deal changer if they get there. The deal changer for the whole world.
Maybe they would blow themselves up.
Right. Yeah.
My personal opinion, after really looking at this weekend, the attack and everything, I think there's a lot of saber rattling going on around here. And if you notice, like those incoming fireballs and so on, and whatnot, they were the missiles that were hit and they were falling. None of them hit in the cities.
Right.
All of that debris. Now, this thing has momentum. You blow it up, it still has momentum. Now, if they were coming down towards the city, you blow them up, you're going to have debris. You can have fires starting and things of that nature. And it seemed to me like they were trying to avoid, like, in other words, like half, I don't know, not half, but a good number of the drones never even made it. Not that they were shot down, they just failed and fell
Right.
to the ground. And I just wonder how much of this was for Iran to save face. They don't want nuclear war any more than anybody else does, because
Right.
they know they're going to wipe out. But to the entire Middle East, especially, they had to say, "Oh yeah, we had to do, and we had." If you saw, I think it was on the mirrors on the television in Iran, they were showing these huge fires.
It was in Chile. Yeah.
It was Brazil or something, a forest fire in Brazil 5 years ago, and they were saying that this was Israel
Right.
today, and
Right.
Jerusalem burning and everything else. So I just wonder how much, and I'm interested to see the results of the Israeli response, and if it will be more of the same, similar, a lot
Yeah,
of action,
we
but
don't
not
know.
a lot of depth in
Yeah.
construction.
Right. Yeah. A lot of possibilities. A lot of possibilities.
I think it goes back to, again, to trust. At least for me, whenever anything happens and it starts to scare me, first thing I do is pray to the Lord.
Right.
Ask Him. When I start putting my faith back in Him, and I think, whenever our time comes, it's gonna come. We're gonna die.
Right.
But they were talking even about these nuclear things. If we have a nuclear war, don't even bother going into a shelter because you're never gonna come out.
Right.
There's no protection.
My personal view is that, yeah, there could be a nuclear exchange, but I am convinced, maybe you're wrong, that it's after the rapture. Our blessed hope, Titus 2:13, is the appearing and return of our Lord and Savior, which is the rapture of the church. We're not hoping to escape a nuclear exchange. We're hoping to escape everything. Because that's one more thing. In Luke 21, I think 36, somewhere around there, Jesus concludes by stating, pray that you're worthy to escape, not some, all that's going to happen.
And that's where, if you read in the Bible, and I forgot exactly where, it says that the church, He's going to rapture up the church, which is all the people.
Right.
So it's anyone in the church will go up.
Right.
Because He's going to save the church.
Exactly. That's
And
what the
the
rapture
people are
is.
the
Right.
church.
Right.
So
The
I
church,
don't
the
really
church
care.
being, the church being the body of Christ, born again, Bible believing evangelical Christian. All right. 5-0. New record. This is it.
You sure you don't have a few more things to say?
I do, but if I do, I'll get kicked and that stupid clock will be. Okay, Rick, can you close this?
Pray, guys. Father God, we thank you that we can come together, as has even been discussed here tonight, that this is our blessed hope, the promise that you've given to us, Father, that we're going to be face to face with you. And I think it's going to be soon. Father, we just ask that as we leave here, that we not leave full of fear and dread, but we leave with hope and with a mission that we're going to speak to people about faith in Jesus Christ. Speak to people about the hope that we have. Lord, I just pray that you give us the insight, wisdom to know what to say, when to say it, and when to be quiet too. Lord, we do this because we have a vision of what's going to be to those people that do not have faith. It's not good. And it's something that we need to undo. Father, go with us now as we leave here. We just pray for your blessing and for your safety. And that we get to come back together again to your mouth. Father, we pray these things in Jesus' name.
Amen.